welcome to another episode of Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and we're once again joined by Hadley,
Hello, I am Hadley.
and we're here to discuss the classic series episode The Hand of Fear. Now, I want to flag this nice and early. If we sound a bit different, that's because this week we are recording live and in person.
Not live.
Not live,
We are alive.
I sure feel alive right now. Um, and it's slightly different, this recording setup. So, if the audio sounds different or weird at any point, that's truly because this is the best we can do given the circumstances.
We are using my laptop's built-in microphone, and we all need to be sitting right next to each other, and my computer needs to be put in at a very specific angle that all three of us are picked up and not distorted.
Yeah, it's at like 20 degrees for some reason. So, this was kind of a last minute thing, and we'll be better prepared in the future in case this happens again. But putting that aside, The Hand of Fear. It is a Fourth Doctor episode and is the final regular story to feature Sarah Jane Smith as a companion. In between the recording of the Lazarus Experiment and this, we did quickly discuss, hey, what do we think of the episode, just briefly. And I said something that kind of caught Fitz off guard, and I'll repeat it again. The words that I think I said was, for me, was up there with Carnival of Monsters. Upon reflection, that may have been maybe a bit too strong in affirmation. I still quite enjoyed while I was watching it. But I've had a few days to reflect since then, and yeah, no, there are definitely issues that this story has that Carnival of Monsters just didn't. So it's definitely not in that same league. I still think it's good.
Did you watch that episode on that day?
I did, yeah.
I watched it the night before.
Mhm.
This one I did rewatch.
Cool.
Because I actually like this episode. This is probably the unironically best classic Who you've shown me. I still found Two Doctors more entertaining,
Sure.
but I can admit Hand of Fear is better made. The first half to me is not nearly as interesting as the second half.
I
I
agree.
think we get a really good side to see the Fourth Doctor's sort of diplomacy, where not only is he curious about this new alien and he's trying to bring peace, but he's also like, she could blow up the Earth. Let's be careful, guys.
Yeah, definitely. Anything you'd like to say, Fitz?
Yeah. So I'm kind of a little bit different to you folks in terms of how I feel about it. The middle part, like episodes 2 and 3, I think are probably where it's strongest for me.
I agree with that.
Episode 1, it's not bad, and I like what it does, and it's maybe obvious to say, but it's important for setup. But the ending, I think it kind of throws away its most unique element for more cliched sci-fi storytelling. And even though that's really entertaining, it's not given enough space to really breathe and to be effective. And because it feels so rushed, it kind of wastes all the other cool ideas that the story was dealing with, so that's kind of a shame.
I think the thing that I said to you is that one of the reasons at the time I said I ranked it so highly is because of what it does differently than most classic
Yeah,
films.
which is true.
And that was mainly the whole, at least in episode 3, when Eldrad isn't a maniacal monster and it's, the more diplomatic approach. And
Yeah.
even in episode 4, when that went away, I still appreciated that it wasn't a whole thing where it was like, oh no, it turns out all of the Castellans are evil. And it's the sci-fi thing again, where all of this species is evil. They're all predisposed to it, and there's no variation in the species. No, they did do some of that in episode 4, and those bits I quite enjoyed. But I think I tend to agree that once Eldrad drops the facade in episode 4, it does get a bit, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah. It's a shame because they had Stephen Thorne come back to play the other Castrian Eldrad, and he's great. He's clearly having a real fun time, and he's just got such a presence to his performance. I find it compelling whenever he's on screen, and given how really not just cartoonish, because it is kind of a cartoonish role and performance, but how unbelievably cookie cutter that character kind of becomes. There's a lot of dimension in his performance, which is just really kind of wonderful. Unfortunately, it really just squanders some of the more interesting ideas because I can admire that they're packing in so much into this story that we go from, oh, let's help this person to, oh no, they're a terrible villain. But again, they're just sacrificing the most interesting idea, which is treating Eldrad as a friend, a creature in distress, a very powerful creature in distress that could destroy the world, but still, that's its most novel concept, and it kind of just gets tossed aside for, ooh, I'm the evil king, and I'm gonna rule everything forever, and it's,
My birthright.
uh, yeah.
Female Eldrad feels like a philosophy tube costume.
Look, with the,
Uh,
such great insights you bring whenever you show up on the podcast, Hadley.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I have no reference to Doctor Who. I'm just like, is this fun? Yes, I like.
Cool. Well, I want to talk quickly about the initial production of this episode because it was initially very different.
yeah, I read some notes that it would be, I think even the script itself had went through quite a few changes.
Yeah, so I'm going to read directly from the Wikipedia here. When Elizabeth Sladen announced her intention to leave the series, Sarah Jane Smith was originally supposed to be killed off
Ooh.
in a pseudo-historical story involving aliens and the French Foreign Legion. Now,
What is the French Foreign Legion?
It's, they were, I think they were from World War II. They were a specific section of the French army during World War II.
I thought it was just a weird alien race from Doctor Who that
oh, no,
like
no.
bubble themselves up.
No, the French Foreign Legion are not a returning monster. But so, how do we think that would have gone down? Because I would say not well.
No, given the legacy that Sarah Jane, I think had even started to build up, up to that point. Yeah, that would have been pretty bitter. I think the only sort of companion death that we'd had up to that point was one character that was part of the Daleks' master plan, which is a long story, but one story. So a season's work basically.
The reason that didn't happen is because the writer that they reached out to do it was unavailable, and so they went with a different story instead.
Only that writer could have written that.
Oh, sure, I think it was maybe his idea. Elizabeth Sladen was adamant about not wanting Sarah Jane Smith to be killed or married off.
Oh,
Nice.
isn't that how the Sarah Jane Adventures ends?
There's a marriage episode in it, but it's not how it ends.
Okay.
Still nice.
I mean, given what we do get, her send off feels very rushed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
We'll be talking about that later, but yeah.
Because I assumed it wasn't the last episode of her. I just thought it was like, oh, well, we're just doing this whole, like, arc on Gallifrey. We can't have Sarah Jane there. She'll be back in the next arc.
That's kind of how, like, companions weren't really given big story arcs in Classic Who, and there was never really a big, oh, this is the companion send-off episode, let's make it all about them. In fact, Elizabeth Sladen didn't want that at all. She felt that the program was about the Doctor, not the companion, so she didn't want Sarah Jane Smith's departure to be a big focus of the story.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of what this story was originally going to be, we have draft 2 here.
Oh.
After the French Foreign Legion was involved, rather, the original script for the story featured an aging Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart.
Oh yeah.
Who had been moved from the US
About
to
this.
the Extraterrestrial Xenological Intelligence Task Force to study UFO activities. He was to be killed when he steered his spaceship into an Omegan kamikaze ship to prevent that ship from crashing into Earth. What is it about the original that was so keen on killing fans' favorite companion characters?
Well, the Brigadier is a soldier character that.
What was it about 1976 that made the entire BBC bloodthirsty?
They might have yet. They couldn't take it out on the communists. They had to take it out on their Doctor Who.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, Jesus, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
That's different both from what we got and what I think anyone would expect of a classic
Or one
story, or want. Well, it's funny you talk about a lack of um, character arcs for companions in Classic Who. You are right, I think. The closest we would get would be, or the most prominent example of it being with Ace in her final season.
So,
Um, but yeah, generally speaking, they certainly weren't common.
so thank God we didn't get either of those versions of this.
Yeah, those would have been I mean, they're not as bad, but they sound almost as bad as the the Boomtown early drafts that we found out about.
Oof.
Yeah, maybe not as ethically repulsive, but still.
Did you like there's an even worse version of Boomtown?
Yeah,
If you can imagine it.
yeah.
Oh, man. Sorry, no, I think I'll find. I don't remember if we like fully discussed this in our Boomtown discussion, but even if
We
did,
discussed it to a pretty surprising
either
degree.
way, it was a while ago, and
Oh no, I can still remember it. It was
Hardly even worth to be explained to
yeah,
you.
I would also like to remember what this originally was. Um, okay, so production. Here we go. The original episode was called "The Void," um, and it would reveal a storyline that Rose had been bred by the Doctor as an experiment in creating a perfect companion.
Funny.
Yeah, yeah, real funny, especially since Rose is far from perfect. It would have been great.
It's like did he just like have a really, really bad day after the Time War and he's just like, you know what?
from what I remember, the only reason that story never came about was because of scheduling conflicts.
That's like Marge having bunny ears under her hair. It's that level of stupid. It's like there was a
Yeah.
point in time where you were writing that plot line. Why?
Yeah.
It's so great how many awful Doctor Who stories we never got because of scheduling conflicts with writers.
Oh,
Like, all that stuff we discussed, we also didn't get the episode written by J.K. Rowling about the Doctor saving her from her own characters, which was
is that seriously
Christie?
no.
No,
is
like
that
you
was
gotta
that
have, like
seriously an
That
idea?
that was what was going to be a Christmas special, and instead we got the next Doctor with David Morrissey as the Victorian character. But that was originally going to be J.K. Rowling writing an episode and starring in it, with David Tennant having to save J.K. Rowling after she falls into like a dream state and her characters start attacking her. And I think that David Tennant was the one who said, "That's a horrible idea. Let's not do that."
Wow.
they should have had him play Barty Crouch Jr.
Mm.
Oh, so, Christ alive.
But anyway, what we're actually talking about, it begins. I find it so interesting that like each of the four episodes in this story are really different.
Hmm.
Like tonally,
Yeah.
where Sarah Jane has been possessed by the hand of Eldrad and is doing its bidding. Episode two is this nuclear war, not even a nuclear war, but it's a nuclear power subplot.
Yeah.
Episode three is about diplomatic relations between Earth and Eldrad, and episode four is a shit show. But
Quite an entertaining shit show.
albeit, yeah. I am so. When you have a story that's structured like that, there's two ways it can go. I think that for the most part, it weaves everything together fairly well. Like it doesn't end up becoming like a late season Simpsons episode where you're watching the third act and you're like, wait, how did we get here? What happened? The first act had potential. Why did you drop it for this?
Let's be fair, classic Simpsons also did
It
that.
does, but most of the times when classic Simpsons does it, there's a reason for it. Like it doesn't set up something in Act One and go, "That's interesting." Anyway, let's move to this other thing.
It's
Like,
not a human resources situation. That was exclusive to last episode.
sure, yeah, yeah. Um, sorry, yeah.
Is that a reference to the meme that I was encouraged to make?
Yeah, it was.
I might put that meme in the community section of the YouTube.
Yeah, you may as well, because I did make that meme.
Yeah.
And it's about as funny as I'm gonna stop talking.
Yeah, cool.
Now.
But when you're watching the first episode and you're seeing Sarah Jane being possessed and doing Eldrad's will, I was watching it in the back of my mind.
Okay.
But when you're watching that first episode, and Sarah Jane's being possessed, at least me in the back of my mind, I was like, "Oh, this is Sarah Jane's last episode." does this tie in somehow? Like, is she going to be so traumatized from this experience that she has to give the TARDIS a break for a while? Is this going to be a Tegan situation? But no, it wasn't. It's just
I
this
mean, they
thing that Sarah Jane is in, so what's going to happen? It's not a problem.
I mean, they sort of hint at her being sort of exhausted of the TARDIS, but then they completely toss that away because then she says, "Oh no, 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 I didn't mean it."
Well, actually, I was going to ask you, like the episode when they land initially in the quarry in the beginning, she says, "Oh, this isn't Croydon." Had they established at the end of the previous Classic Who story that she was like eager to go back home now?
I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't ring a bell. Do you know what the story was?
What was the previous story? Let's check on that. While I'm looking that up, the quarry explosion was a legitimate one that they filmed for this episode. It wasn't like archive footage of something else that
That's actually pretty impressive.
they've done that in the past. There was a rumor that was uh, debunked by the DVD commentary of this that a camera from the BBC had been destroyed in the blast for some reason. That was a big thing. But so the previous story was called "The Mask of Mandragora."
Um, I don't remember. But that would make sense.
I'll check. I've got a little summary here.
Okay.
Something I wanted to mention as a little pet peeve of mine. I think the writing really leans into the idea of Eldrad being a silicon-based life form. It's like, what if there were rock people? All the corpses are piles of sand. And it's like, we're carbon-based life forms. We're not made of coal. We don't turn into diamonds when we die.
Isn't all matter just? I'm not a scientist. I've got no idea.
Yeah, I mean,
But I actually think it's a cool idea. But you're right.
it's an interesting idea, and for what they for how they use it in the story, I mean, at the very least, like I'm happy that they explored it as much as they did, rather than just go, "Oh, they're silicon based." Anyway, moving on.
Yeah,
They at least try to do some
like
interesting stuff with it.
it's worked in well enough, and the science behind it makes enough sense.
At least in for the standard of classic Who.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like Underworld.
Have you seen the dinosaurs that classic Who tried to?
No, I know Sam was involved in one of those episodes, wasn't?
Well, here's the thing. She
Yeah.
said that given the time, they were surprisingly accurate, and not to traumatize you all over again, Cuff, but this is not like Underworld.
It's not like Underworld. That's the other one I was going to say, but
Hmm.
it's easier to show Hadley the dinosaurs
Oh
than
yeah.
describe what happened in Underworld. So yeah,
Oh yeah, that's cute. Are they like stop motion?
yeah,
No. Oh, I wish they were stop motion. No, they were puppets.
Yeah, they look fine.
yeah, but like not in any way historically accurate. Like that is a huge Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
And it was like a marionette, tiny little pterodactyl that flew through a car window.
Flew through a car window. That's right. I forgot about that. So while Sarah Jane is being possessed, she's got the ring, which becomes important. I have no idea how, like, while we're talking about silicon life forms, how do rings work? Like, is there any reason that a ring would be harder to take off a silicon or a rock finger? I'm sure it wouldn't that cause. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting hung up on the
I
wrong
mean,
thing.
maybe like I just assume because it's petrified in stone, it's just hard to physically pull.
Could be. I'm just talking about like for when they're just living.
Oh, okay.
Like, does it make sense to slide a ring onto a rock? Surely that would be like you would hit some grooves, cause some friction, like it would chip.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I can chalk it up to wacky sci-fi stuff.
I suppose. But she uses the ring to like knock out people, basically,
Hmm.
and then we learn. I think that there's that one scientist dude from the hospital who was quite a likable character, and it's a shame that he went out in such a way that he did.
Is this the guy that's played by Rex Robinson, who also played Dr. Tyler in the Three Doctors?
It could be. It could be. He's
I think that's the guy. I think that's the guy you're talking about. Who's
yeah, he's in episode one, and then in episode two, he ends up being possessed by Eldrad as well, and then he tries to take a swing
yeah,
at
yeah. I'm pretty sure that's him. Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure that's him.
So when he is being possessed after that because he saw the light of Eldrad from the ring. But he's the only one, right? Like no one else that Sarah Jane does that to. We don't see them possessed anyway. So I was expecting there to be a moment when like the army of Eldrad came in, but there just wasn't. So it
Hmm.
felt weird to me that that's like the one situation in which that happened.
I mean, yeah. It didn't. like that just didn't bother me enough to like make me think, hang on, what the fuck is going on here? But fair enough to bring it up.
Um, but then, like, basically the entire premise of the first two episodes is bringing Eldrad back. Is the whole Eldrad must live thing.
Hmm.
And I'll admit, for the longest time, I thought the name was Eldrak because that's just what I kept hearing.
Mhm.
Eldrak must live. I never heard Eldrad until the character was there and said their
Hmm.
name. I went, oh, that's what you are? But what about Eldrak? It was a whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like when they're calling in nuclear strikes, and there's the reactors about to go off and everything. It's suitably intense throughout. I mean, one of my favorite moments in the first two episodes is strangely when the the director of the power plant just called home and was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be late."
Yeah, no, that's great.
It's actually a really nice humanizing
Yeah,
moment that you don't often see in classic.
yeah.
I like the doctor line. This isn't going to help, but I like to be tidy.
Yeah, that's a very Tom Baker thing to say as well.
Um, or when he says, the old-fashioned weapons, diplomacy, conversation,
Mhm.
really, really good stuff. Um, yeah, it's but yes, that humanizing moment, Puff, you're right to bring that up because I think it is really powerful, and you're right in that a lot of the times those sorts of side characters, um, we really don't get to see their lives all that much in
Mm.
these sorts of stories. So the fact that the story was able to sort of pause and help us reflect on the human cost of all this is really quite good.
Yeah, and I think it's like this is the most the episode touches on it as well, but like the nuclear power theme throughout
Mm,
the story,
mm.
they never really take a point of saying, "Oh, nuclear power is bad." It's just there just happens to be a nuclear power station that goes to boom twice.
Another Morgana episode as well.
Oh yeah, that's right, the with the Arthurian characters,
Yeah,
Battlefield, is that
yeah,
what that's called?
Battlefield.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that was the late '80s when it was more accepted as being like nuclear power clearly being a bad thing. This is the mid '70s, so
Yeah.
I think that was still a thing.
it
That was the
was
Cold War.
it was the Cold War. I think that's why it was like a bit more commonplace because it was just like, oh, we need to beat Russia. But then by the end of the late '80s, it's like, no, no, this Cold War's stupid. What are you doing? No, no,
Yeah,
no.
I think by that point, I mean, that would have been 89, so that would have been the last year of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Um, hey, at least they're not building a nuclear reactor in Cardiff.
Why we keep bringing up Boomtown, man? We don't have to.
Yeah.
We don't have to do that.
You need to watch Torchwood, then you'll get all new sorts of material.
Wait, yeah, Cyberwoman. That's gonna be
Yeah.
Chris Chibnall's finest moment.
Uh, I mean, it arguably might be the best he's ever written, the Cyberman. Arguably might be.
Oh, oh yeah, no, like him individually writing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's entirely possible. Anyway, that's a whole other thing that we're not going to torment ourselves with.
Nope. Nope. Um, but then I was skipping ahead a bit, but it's just way more interesting to talk about episode three.
Yeah, I mean, I will. I'll say that those first two episodes, they're good for what they are, and they're different enough that you have this conceit of Sarah Jane being sort of hypnotized, which is kind of interesting. And it's pretty tense, mainly because they're in a nuclear facility.
Yeah.
And incidentally, I found out that was a real nuclear facility that they filmed at. I thought they just filmed like some, abandoned factory or something. Good for them.
And like the strength of the first two episodes is the looming threat
Yeah,
presence that Eldrad has.
yeah.
I think primarily because the first thing Eldrad does is possess Sarah Jane, which
Yeah.
right off the bat you're like, oh, okay, that's not on. Eldrad means business.
But then there's like a fun little thing they do where rather than not being able to decide which threat is more serious, Eldrad or
Hmm.
nuclear threat, they sort of help that a bit by showing that Eldrad absorbs radiation.
Yeah.
So there's tension, but it's different from what you would expect. And that's great because I think if you've got a story where you're trying to combine nuclear apocalypse and alien invasion, it would be very, very easy to make that story terrible
Yeah.
because they wouldn't be able to decide which was the more important.
One thing that I forgot until now, and I want to mention as well, is that whenever the hand is moving around on its own, it's actually a really decent effect, especially for
Yeah,
1974. Like at the end of episode one, when it first starts moving around, I'm like, oh, that's
yeah.
a cool sequence.
For,
It
for,
was pioneered in the Adams Family. It was
Yeah.
perfected in Doctor Who.
unbelievable, actually, that I think, yeah, no, I read it. That element of the hand is meant to be a reference to a movie called The Beast with Five Fingers, which incidentally was a movie that frightened the living daylights out of my grandmother.
Okay.
Um,
Well, there you go.
because, yeah, one from the 50s with Peter Lorre, and yeah, there was a hand that tracked around and killed people. But yes, the special effects for that hand are done really well.
Yeah.
That and even the direction of it, because like obviously they've got a hand in there, but it's directed in such a way that you never really see it. I love there was one bit where it's kind of in the darkness, and it's
Mm.
just yeah, it's
Yeah.
really completely works.
I would have liked if the conflict with like the nuclear domination and Eldrad and her people should have felt more connected.
Yeah, it did sort of feel like, okay, now
I
that
guess.
Eldra's here, like it. Well, it's sort of tied up in the episode, and not in the best way. Where it's like Eldrad's here. Oh, she's absorbed all the radiation. Threat's gone.
Yeah.
But what you would do is ideally, like Eldrad and her people would be some sort of analog for the Cold War.
Mm.
You'd have some sort of Cold War going on her planet. You'd be like, this
Well,
is stupid.
I wonder if that's what they were trying to do
Mm.
by the end, with Eldrad being okay. Let's conquer the cosmos or everything, whatever that was, and this ties into episode four not being that great, but maybe that was the intention and it just didn't land well. Um,
Given what they did with it, I thought mixing those two ideas was pretty good. But yeah, I think you're right, Hadley, in that it's not as cohesive as it could be. I'm just glad that it wasn't a total disaster because it very easily could have been. I think.
yeah, I think that's like one of the few elements of the story where the through line doesn't quite stack up. Like obviously the nuclear war stuff in the first, well, it's not even nuclear war, but the nuclear stuff in the first half gets us where we need to go for Eldrad, and once she appears,
But episodes 1 and 2 feels like its own thing from episodes 3 and 4.
but and there's also that's also a thing. Well, it's not the transition in episode three isn't too bad because like the whole we can sort this out peacefully with Eldrad. There's no need to fight her. There's no need to like call in the military. That way she won't do anything either. That all felt kind of mutually assured destruction in a way.
Yeah, I guess so. But I wonder, in terms of sort of just getting the Doctor and Sarah and Aldred to be combative against each other, only for the Doctor and Sarah to realize, oh no, we need to help this person. Could that have been done theoretically in a smoother way? Like if I mean, they wouldn't have done it back then, but if they had like 3 episodes, for example, and the first one is Eldrad shows up, maybe hypnotizes Sarah and a couple of other people. We get rid of most of the nuclear stuff, and it's just sort of the threat Eldrad poses, and then maybe Eldrad talks to the Doctor, and then they agree to help each other, and then it's off to Astria. Mind you, as we've discussed, episode 4 isn't that strong anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we'll discuss it by the end of the episode and how we write it differently. Um, but I think let's talk about it now. I think Eldrad's appearance in episode three, when she starts what we now know is spinning lies about how she ended up in that quarry, how she was disintegrated or obliterated or whatever word they use 150 million years ago. And she's talking about, okay, no, the memories of my people are still intact. We were destroyed when they sabotaged my technology to keep the winds at bay. It's all like it's pretty decent. Like the Castellan stuff in episode four isn't great, but the world building is really solid. Castria, yeah, the Castrian world building. It's not it's pretty solid world building for stuff that doesn't amount to a huge amount of story depth.
Yeah.
But when she's talking about it in episode three, like she takes you there.
One of the issues I had near the beginning was actually that opening
The
because
opening, I forgot about the opening.
yeah, well, the frustrating thing is there are a couple of things, and I assumed I hope it's not just because I've got some hearing loss, but the dialogue is hard to hear with
It
those
is.
characters in those costumes, so that makes it already very frustrating. But also, they are really throwing a lot of world building to you from the get onto you from the get go, and that's kind of cool. It's really interesting, but if you're going to do that, you need to make the world building clearer from the beginning. So that was a bit frustrating, and it doesn't really foreshadow how sort of interesting and strong the world building becomes later on
Mm.
in the story. So yeah, but like overall world building is pretty solid.
Um, yeah, and then we have this character of Eldrad, um, who she's she's doing all of this stuff, at least initially we're told, because she's learned not to trust people.
Mm.
And that's definitely true for the final character that we get in episode 4 as well.
Mm.
But her journey in the third episode to learning to rely on the Doctor and Sarah Jane and learning to befriend them and learning to trust them is a nice arc, and
Yeah,
it comes out really naturally in the storytelling with how she needs their space. Well, they use it as a spaceship, but they use the TARDIS to take her back to Castria
mm.
and all that stuff, and how the narrative really seamlessly gets them to rely on each other in various times. It's really good to see, and it's really nice to watch. And
Yeah.
I was hoping anyway that the final episode wouldn't um, reveal it was all a lie, and of course they did. Um,
Twist villain.
twist villain, yeah, the classic Disney twist villain kind of thing. Um,
Ah,
even in the 70s, Disney was ruining Doctor Who.
well,
It almost felt inevitable, though.
It kind of did.
it kind of did.
I was expecting more of like a okay, they get to Castria, and then they kind of walked us down that road with the booby traps and the bait and switch of the king. But I was expecting it to be like okay, now let's free the people of Castria from this oppressive ruling force, so that Eldrad can take their rightful place and lead the people up again.
But oh no, Eldrad is the oppressive force.
Eldrad is the oppressive force.
Asking for like a dozen Castrian costumes, that was never happening.
Yeah. It was actually really funny, but it took me longer than it should have to realize this. There are a number of shots in episode 3 and 4 where it's like the security system you're seeing, and you're seeing what looks like a Castrian sitting at the computer, but it's actually just either a petrified body or a suit, I think.
Yeah,
At least that's the implication. And it took me longer to realize, oh, that's what that is. It's not alive.
um, yeah. And okay, so let's talk about that final episode now, because there's a lot that happens, and I don't hate all of it. I just want to throw that out there.
First, we need to figure out Eldrad's pronouns.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
this is I think it's definitely the first trans character in the show. Let's throw that out there. Progressive in 1974. They didn't go woke in the 2000s. It's been there the whole time. Um, I'm just going to call them a they, because um, we get two different genders in the show, so it's just easier to do that. Um,
They
them seems appropriate. So the stuff in episode 4 that I think is the most interesting is when they're talking about what happened on Castria and when they're trying to figure it out. When we learn that everyone is gone and it's been millions and millions of years and there is no king, and I don't. I said I like it, but I think that's just because it was a shock at the time. But the idea that the Castrians 150 million years ago went, we've obliterated Eldrad, but we know they're going to find a way back. So what we're going to do is, as a species, commit suicide.
Insane.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
And it's presented at the time as like a fuck you, Eldrad. This is what you get. Good luck ruling over no one, you fuckwit.
It's kind of funny, like you talk about how it shows that the Castrians aren't of all of one mind, that
Which I
Eldred
like.
is an evil megalomaniac. But they kind of are if they all just collectively decide to destroy themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to think of another story that does something like that because it's never been done before, but also it's so fucking stupid. Of course, it's never been done before.
and it's also presented like it's not casually, but the way that the recording of the king just sort of explains matter of factly how it happened. I think that's partly I think that's a big part of the reason why I said what I said the other day because at the time I was watching, I was like, holy shit, this is bold.
And and in a way, that is kind of the frustrating thing. There are really interesting elements in that episode.
Mm.
I really love when the other king says to Eldrad, cheers to Eldrad, king of nothing, or something like that. It's great.
Yeah.
Um, and even the idea of having this whole group of people just deciding, yep, we're going to destroy ourselves just as a fuck you to this.
Well, I think you can look at it altruistically as well.
Oh yeah,
We've wiped out civilization.
well, that's the frustrating thing because they sort of touch on, I think,
They do in the bit.
the implications of leaving Eldrad to their devices, but it's not really explored
It's not.
work. And that's the big issue I have with episode 4. I really like those ideas.
Yeah.
And having Eldrad be, king of nothing in combination with Stephen Thorne's fantastic forms, that's a really cool idea. Even if it has kind of been done with Doctor Who before. And I'd love to see that, but oh my god, they don't give it nearly enough time to make that work.
Couldn't they have enjoyed peaceful civilization for 100 million years, then kill themselves?
Well, I think the issue is they don't. Like, did they say in the episode that they had like a right? We have a clear, hard and fast timeline in our heads of how long it's going to take Eldrad to come back. I don't think they. Okay, let's predict this. Okay, so they're going to lie dormant for 150 million years, and then a time traveler is going to happen upon the
I was gonna say, how would they even know like what planet that
Yeah.
Eldrad was in?
I think it was the implication was definitely no. We don't know how or when, but Eldrad is. Although I do find it funny if they were.
And it's frustrating because if they wanted to really sell that Eldrad is so powerful and so terrifying that they needed to do that, I could almost believe it. But again, nowhere near enough attention is devoted to that to make it work. Because if this was almost like a Dalek Stavros story, right, where the Daleks wanted to destroy a certain amount of their population so Davros could like experiment on them, for example. I could actually believe that, knowing
Well, that's because the Daleks.
Davros. That's correct. Yeah, and also we know who Davros is, so what are we doing? But yeah, it just doesn't.
About Eldrad's characterization in this. The more Eldrad grows and the stronger Eldrad gets, the less effective they are shown to be.
Yeah,
Because like the story, the way that the story is structured, Eldrad does the most of their evil deeds while they're a hand. And then they're like somewhat effective while she's in a female form. But then once she's fully regenerated and back to Eldrad Prime, the way the story is structured, there's nothing for Eldrad to do.
yeah. And I don't know whether that's because the environment of Castria is meant to be, I guess, more imposing than Earth. But yeah, like it's
It's a very Superman thing.
mm,
Well, I think it's also just because the civilization of Eldrad is 150 million years dead, so there's nothing there but
like it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And as fun as it is to have the novelty of all of this power and horror coming from a hand, um, they don't really, again, like they don't explore these ideas thoroughly enough to make them all work. They work well enough for the story, and given how much the story is throwing at us, it at the very least could have been way worse. But yeah, it's just not
well,
quite coming together.
here's another thing about um, the whole King of Nothing sub story that I think is a bit ruined. They should have just left Eldrad at that. I don't think we needed to have a chase sequence where they have to drop Eldrad down a pit. You don't need it.
That was very silly.
I think it's more effective if you're trying to tell that story to have Eldrad learn that, be in anguish, and then have the Doctor and Sarah just leave him there.
So, like Omega's ending in
Like Omega's ending,
which
yeah.
is that would be God, that would be so funny.
And we have a precedence for this species killing themselves in the face of hopelessness.
Yeah. Or you could maybe even do that. You have Sarah and the Doctor offer Eldrad like
A new world.
new world. But I suppose that he's been shown to be an evil, like cosmos conquering overlord, so that would probably be out of character for
But
this world.
but it would still be kind of interesting. Like if you have the Doctor offering, I can take you to a new planet, which we've seen the Doctor do
Oh yeah.
a number of times, and then have Eldrad refuse. It may not be the most original idea, but it would still be, I think, pretty compelling. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to be king of nothing. I'll be king of all of this. Fuck you, Doctor. Get away from me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and then the scarf gets brought out, and it's stretched along the thing by the Doctor and Sarah Jane, and it's somehow a woven scarf is somehow strong enough to fell a silicon being.
Well, we've established that they fall for BB traps.
That's true. That's true. I was a bit annoyed by that episode 3 cliffhanger because like the spear comes out of nowhere, but then in the next episode, no, it becomes the way it was like filmed. I was like, whoa, what the hell is this? But then in episode 4, when it's like, oh no, this thing is poisoning me, I'm like, okay, that's a fine enough cliffhanger. Damn, I've seen
find
worse.
out the consequences of the cliffhanger after the
After the
cliffhanger.
cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true. That's true. It's not the best structure than
I was
that.
going to say, when I was watching that, I thought, oh God, are they going to do another? Is this a classic?
Yeah. Oh no, the spear's got me.
Oh,
I'm
no.
fine.
I think Doctor Who and Goosebumps aren't so different at all.
No, I think we've talked about that before. But this is a rare situation. Like normally the classic Doctor Who cliffhanger is, oh no, this big consequence, and it's fine.
Yeah.
And then this is the opposite. It's like, oh, there's something happened. Oh, there's big consequences.
It's like, no, don't worry. It's a fake gun.
It's a yeah.
Yep.
Which it's a bit out of order, but I did like the stakes in the first half of episode 4, where it's like we have to get Eldrin to this thing quick enough before the poison.
Yeah, no, that was very
acid takes her over. I thought that was an interesting enough story for the first one.
It's even some kind of cool practical effects where you see like these black sort of veins.
Yeah. Actually, that's how I would rewrite it. I think that's how I would do it. They have episode 4. They're trying to get Eldrad to this thing to revive her, and as they're going there, they're learning as they progress deeper and deeper what happened to Castria. And we learn the more deeper we go, the more defunct we learn it is, the less alive we learn it is, and by the time we get to the final chamber, it's like, oh, the planet's been dead so long, this thing is dead and it's not going to work, and we have this tragic ending for Eldrad. I think I would have preferred that than what we ended up got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would have been a bit of a bleak ending of the episode, but Doctor Who does that sometimes.
And that, honestly, that could have been more of an impetus for Sarah Jane's department.
Which brings us to the final scenes of the episode.
The Doctor goes to the Nether.
It goes to the Nether, yeah. Well, we have this conversation while the Doctor is fixing the TARDIS, which, by the way, I don't think we brought this up yet. It's a really unique TARDIS interior.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether that's just like an extra TARDIS console or whether that was meant to be like a temporary.
Because the Fifth Doctor's TARDIS goes back to the white things,
Yeah.
the blue things, and it's reminiscent of the TARDIS that McCoy has at the start of the TV movie.
Yeah.
Like other than that, it's like the most unique TARDIS.
I think it's meant to be like a bonus console.
But anyway,
Like an auxiliary console or something.
Sarah Jane is having a fairly reasonable conversation with the Doctor about how she doesn't feel like
She wants to be human again.
she wants to be human again. That's all going on. But then there's this layer of like the Doctor for some reason not like listening to her, which is a weird thing the classic Who loves to do, where the Doctor just casually disrespects his companions every now and then.
I'm sorry, every now and then. I'm joking.
Just doing more numbers.
I think it's more prominent with John Pertwee, especially when he's interacting with Jo. He can be a real, you know what?
Because you say that, but based on what we've seen, it's way more present with the Sixth Doctor.
Oh yeah,
He just hates
yeah.
her,
Oh yeah. The
despises her.
Um, but with the third Doctor, with when Sarah Jane comes along, her characterization is a really interesting sort of combat against that. Because she's so interesting and intelligent, and so you know all that cool stuff. But then I don't know. It's weird. That the element of the Doctor not listening to Sarah. That's again a cool idea. Really not explored that much
No.
in this story.
Well, it's a shame that the Doctor never has that moment of, oh, I've just realized what she said.
Yeah,
It would have been like,
would have been good.
yeah, it would have been a decent way to cap off that conversation with him being like, oh, now I've heard what she said, and yeah, she's right.
Yeah, and I
But
think,
instead, we get a tie into the Deadly Assassin.
and I think, and I think that the ending at first, because I have watched this twice now, and the first time I did dismiss it quite a lot. I thought, oh God, that's an incredibly blunt, uh, very rushed way of doing things.
Mm.
Having watched it again, I appreciate it a bit more. There are sort of subtle elements of emotion that are there, and I'm relatively comfortable with that. But at the very least, it is a little bit jarring to see this sort of ending for not only a companion, but for one of the most beloved companions in the show. And the absolute least that I can say about it is, and I'm surprised I am saying this, there is no way in the world that Stephen Moffat would have written an ending like that for any companion, let alone Sarah Jane. Can you imagine? Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, is there some sort of character arc that left a bad taste in your mouth, Jacob? Is that
Like Rory's character arc across his time on the show is a good one. My main problem is in the final episode he's in, the focus is basically all on Amy.
Hmm.
And like Rory is just like it's like so reminiscent of like early season 5 Rory or all of Mickey's time on the show. He's just sort of like forced to the side. Here's my issue with the Sarah Jane departure. It's almost there. It's so close.
Mm.
And like I said, the only thing missing is the Doctor recognizing Sarah Jane's feelings.
Yeah.
Because without that, without him having processed what she said, there's no reason in his mind why he can't be like, oh, once I've gone to Gallifrey and done everything I need to do there, I'll just come back for Sarah.
Yeah.
You need to have that moment of the Doctor recognizing that Sarah wants to be human again, so that the timing lines up with her, oh, okay, I'm going to Gallifrey, she can't come. I guess I'll give her what she wants.
Yeah. Then, they rip it out from under the audience's feet by having basically having Sarah say, "Oh no, JK."
I mean, there's kind of I don't think it's really a JK thing. Like she packs, and then like I think for her, the moment when the Doctor actually recognizes it and goes, "Oh, you have to go," it's the moment where she goes, "Oh,
Yeah. Oh right. This is
this is
real.
real. This is real now." That's more it meant more to me. It's not like a, "Oh, you called my bluff, Doctor. I actually wanted to stay the whole time," because like her feelings are valid in the first
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. That's true. No, that's true.
But what did you think of it, Hadley?
Well, when I watched it, I thought it was the case where she was going to come back after whatever we did on Gallifrey. So this is a poorly communicated final companion episode.
Yeah.
Granted, this is the only one I've seen of Classic Who. Maybe this is a regular occurrence.
It's looking. It's
And Jacob's functions can handle better than this.
it's very common for companions in Classic Who to leave at the end of just an episode.
Yeah.
It's common for that to happen.
Do they
Normally,
make a big deal out of finales in Doctor Who? Is it just, yeah, this is the last episode, thank you for the series?
Not generally.
they sometimes make a big deal out of characters' final moments, like when the first ever when the first ever companions left the show.
That was pretty.
They did a whole like 5-minute montage at the end of the final story about what happened to them after they left the TARDIS, and they were just like running around London and being like, "Oh my God, we're back! It's so great!" And then they made a big deal out of it because like it was the first companions. When a character called Tegan left the show, it
That was
was
pretty dramatic.
at the end of the episode of Classic Who with by far the biggest body count.
Yeah.
And she left being like, "This is fucked.
Yeah.
I'm traumatized, Doctor." please, like I need to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that they made like they really shone a light on it.
And then, of course, there's Adric.
There is of course Adric who died killing the dinosaurs. Um,
Well done, Epic.
um, I think this like the moment I think when she's on the streets of what we later learned to be Aberdeen in 2006, um, when she's left there and she's like having a like a doctor, she talks to a dog, she walks off whistling, we get a freeze frame on her. That all feels like it feels final, but it also just feels like too little, too late.
Yeah.
Kind of thing where this is the moment where we put like a big heavy emphasis on the fact that it can.
You feel.
And I wish that they'd had made a bigger deal of it in the TARDIS. There is that classic exchange, "Don't forget me, oh you don't forget me, Sarah Jane," which is genuinely quite nice.
Yeah, that was nice. I like that.
And they call back to it in the Sarah Jane adventures when the 10th Doctor has his adventure in that show. He says to Sarah Jane, "Don't forget me." It ended up being the final scene that David Tennant filmed for the show before anniversary specials. Um, so like it's that is a moment I quite like. I just wish that everything around it justified it a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's it's a bit clumsy. Now I know that Sarah Jane would come back in the Special K9 Company. I can't remember what year that was.
I think it was in between the departure of the Five Doctors. I know that much.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I just can't remember whether it was in the late 70s or the early 80s, but either way, that was the whole thing. But I am willing to bet dollars to donuts they were not planning that when they did this.
Probably not. No.
Yeah, so I kind of I almost admire how bold and sudden it is.
Well, so that explains how Sarah Jane gets canine.
Yes, I don't know how exactly that works, but yes, in the
Well,
intention.
was canine established as a character by this point in the show, like by the Hand of Fear?
Actually, no. No, because I don't think Canine showed up until Leela was around in the next
I only
6
associate canine with Romana
yeah, because
because of that unforgettable time when he walked into the ocean for no
and
reason.
blew up. Yeah, because
And throughout that hellhole before he exploded after jumping into the sea.
um because the Canine I am pretty sure first showed up in the story The Invisible Enemy, which is a Fourth Doctor and Leela's story.
Okay.
Because he was invented by a scientist who's on this planet that they're on.
I would probably assume then that it's probably an early '80s thing because that would have been around the time Canine was established and then like
Oh yeah,
left the
yeah,
show, I guess.
yeah.
I have no idea if Canine got his own companion departure episode. Probably not.
I doubt it.
Yeah. Um, but that's the Hand of Fear at the end of the day. Bit of a mess. Like its individual moments are good, its individual themes are good. Sometimes its characterization is nice. Sometimes
It's
it's nice.
it's average classic Who. Let's put it that way.
It's pretty average. So it gets a 6 from me, which is a far cry from the 9 that I gave Carnivore Classes, which is quite a significant downgrade.
Yeah,
Considering that 2 days ago for us.
I was actually wondering, are you going to give this a higher score than I am? I think I might actually give it a 7 because it's as we say, very uneven, but the moments are really, really good for me, and even the bits that don't work, especially with the old rat transformation and I'm going to rule the planet. Do find those genuinely entertaining.
I'll give it a 7 as well.
Well,
Wow. Okay, I need to write that down. I don't need to, but I'm doing it. Now it's logged on audio.
Leaving it in.
6.67. Awesome. Well, Hadley, is there anything you'd like to plug once again?
Yeah, Goosebumps, we're doing Real Beware on our channel Stale Bread. 2 Goosebumps books a month. Jared and I just exchanged books yesterday. And we should also be finishing off Incredibles on the PS2 next week.
Hell yeah. So next time, me and Fitz are going to be alone again, and we'll be discussing the episode 42, which is
Is this the first Chibsy
it's the
episode?
first Chibsy episode.
Oh, Kitsy.
I've already done
Ugh.
it.
This is for me the most forgettable 10th Doctor story. I
Uh,
have no idea how it's held up compared to
yeah,
Chibsy's writing.
yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I remember it vaguely, but one of the big problems is it's right before Family of Blood.
It's right before.
Okay, yeah, because that's a huge.
This is the last episode of series 3 before we get 6 bangers in a row. So
Uh, oh God, that's
yeah, it's an unfortunate position for it, but
so. Stay tuned. Come along and burn with us because it's probably what's going to happen.
until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz,
And Hadley.
and remember, Eldred must live.
Yep, you got you. I was going to say the same thing. Wasn't going to use that intonation, so I'm glad you got to do it.
Yeah,